since I was 14 years old. Maier Racing was started in 1969, the year that I was born. And I get questions every single day about the suspension that we make and why is it great, or why should I buy one versus another. And the question that I often have to address is when people say, oh, I want the best or I want ideal, I have to figure out what is ideal and the best for that individual customer. So today we're going to talk about the two suspensions that we offer, the Coil Over kit and the standard big spring kit with the modified upper and lower control arm. Typically the customers call us up here and the first question they say is, what is the best suspension you can sell me? And then I ask the question, well, help me out a little bit. What are you doing with the car? Is this a 65 Mustang with a 300 horsepower V8? Or is this a 65 Mustang with an 800 horsepower motor going in? We have all kinds of customers with different budgets and different agendas. The first customer wants just bone stock simple replacement suspension. We don't sell it. The fourth customer wants completely custom. Everything is cut out the shock towers. Money's no object. I'm going for $150,000, $250,000 bill. That's also not our business. So we kind of function in the middle. There's option number 2 and option number 3. And this would be option number 2. This is what we call the standard big spring. This is the spring that comes in your Mustang traditionally. It's all conventional as far as pickup points. This is a Bilstein gas shock. Standard spring perch. We make a modified upper control arm, so it's the stock upper control arm that's been cut and modified, gusseted, and all the locations that it would typically break, we've reinforced. We make it stiffer. It's got a stainless steel shaft, Delrin bushings, lots of little bells and whistles, but it's an inexpensive route, but it's definitely an upgrade. This is our drop spindle, so a lot of guys want to run the biggest wheel that they can. And with the drop spindle, the key to this is if you're running an 18-inch wheel, you can get the top of the wheel over the upper ball joint, which means you can run a wider wheel without having to do flares. The lower control arm is essentially a stock lower control arm, but we box in the bottom to give more stiffness and reinforcement to the lower control arm. The reason that most people would be interested in this kind of a suspension is they see themselves driving the car in a spirited way. The car has a reasonable amount of horsepower, 300, 400 horsepower, something like that. Not that horsepower and suspension are directly connected, but this is the typical customer. This customer wants to install the suspension. They want to pick up a package of product from Maier Racing on a Friday. They want to install it over the weekend, and by Monday morning they want to be driving the car. They want a relatively easy install. Components are predictable, easy to find stock locations and stock pickup points. No extra fabrication required in this particular case. So with this suspension, a guy can have a spirited Mustang, 300, 400 horsepower, something like that. He can autocross with it. He can do track days with it. He can beat on this suspension, and it will take the abuse. And we have figured out all the weak links within the stock suspension and upgraded it. This suspension kit sells for about $2,000. It's the spring, the shock, upper control arm, spring perch, lower control arm. That price does not include the drop spindle, but it does include sway bar, bushings, and strut rod bushing kit. This is our option, when I say option 3, it's really our second option, but for the customer it's option number 3. It's not bone stock. It's not going to be the simple big spring modified assembly we had on the other side. This is our Coil Over setup. This particular package, you can buy it from us. When you get it, you can open it up on a Friday as an example, work on it over the weekend on the install, and essentially by Monday morning be driving it. Everything here mounts into the stock pickup points. No need for modification or fabrication really of any kind. You can pull off the old suspension, put on this new suspension, and get after it. There's one modification that some people choose to do, and that is the Shelby drop. So what that is essentially is relocating the upper A-arm down 1 inch, exactly 1 inch perpendicular to the ground. We offer templates for that if you want it. It's a simple option. It's not complicated to do. You can call us if you want guidance through it, or we can offer the template. There's a lot of questions that come to me from people that have read blogs, different websites, and I think there's a lot of confusion about what's why someone would do a Shelby drop. And essentially what it is when you relocate the lower control arm, when you're lowering the car, that lowers the car about an inch or so, and it changes the angle of the upper A-arm. If you change the angle of the upper A-arm, ultimately the intent is to have more negative camber gain through an inch of travel. So when you move this position down, if you were to graph the movement of this upper ball joint with the inner pivot point down the inch, then essentially when the car goes through its transition of 1 inch of travel, then essentially this is going to pull in the upper mount on the spindle and give you more negative camber. This was hugely necessary in my opinion back in the late 60s, early 70s when you had these really tall sidewall tires and you needed to get as much negative camber gain as you could to get heat and mechanical grip from the tire. Nowadays with the tires that we have, people are going with bigger 18-inch wheels. Even 16 and 17-inch wheels are considered small nowadays. So when you go with an 18-inch wheel, you have a really short sidewall. With the short sidewall, you don't have to work the tire as much to get heat into the tire to get the tire to work. So repositioning this upper point for the Shelby drop, in my view, is not necessarily always the best thing. It's not great, it's not ideal. You can do it if you want, but it's not something that you have to do. If you're running an 18-275 or an 18-315 tire in the front, try to use great rubber like the Bridgestone RE11. It's an amazing tire. It will bring a suspension like this alive. And this suspension kit is the upper pickup point for the shock, the coil over, the spring, upper A-arm, lower control arm is about $3,500. This drop spindle is about another $800 for the pair. We do not sell brakes, calipers, but I've got this assembly here in place to show you that the Willwood brake kit mounts right onto our drop spindle.